more stories about time slips in which a person or persons seem to travel through time by unknown means. Roman army. The Romans arrived in Britain around AD 43 and their conquest was complete by around AD 87, and their conquest had a lasting effect on Britain, which is still visible to this day. However, they not only left ruins behind, where over the centuries there have been many people who've claimed to have encountered Roman soldiers when they were caught up in some kind of time slip. The following two stories are about people who came upon Roman soldiers in modern-day Britain. The first incident happened in the 1960s, when a Mrs. Rawlings from the North London borough of Barnet was visiting a Roman Verulamium in St Albans, north of London. Verulamium was a town in Roman Britain and was situated southwest of the modern city of St Albans in Hertfordshire in southern England. At the time of the incident, Mrs. Rawlings was visiting the Roman ruins that were displayed at the Verulamium Arena, which was part of a major local exhibition. All of a sudden, she noticed a procession of Roman soldiers entering the arena, and they were marching in rank and file, where the standard bearers were carrying what appeared to be the unit insignia, which were carved eagles. Following behind them was a man dressed in white and was wearing a laurel crown. Roman emperors such as Julius Caesar wore laurel crowns to show importance and godly status, and in ancient Rome it was worn on the head as a symbol of triumph. So the man wearing the laurel crown was obviously a high-ranking official and could have been one of the emperors that occasionally visited the area. Then the important official moved to a chair in the centre of the platform area where two standard bearers positioned themselves either side of him. The whole event was happening as Mrs. Rawlings looked on in total astonishment. Then all of a sudden, the whole scene disappeared in front of her eyes, and she was left looking at the modern-day ruins of the Verulamium. Mrs. Rawlings was not the first person to experience a time slip where Roman soldiers appeared, and many people have attested to seeing them all over Britain. On Wednesday, March the 16th, 1988, in West Kirby in northwest England, Brian Hollands, 21, and his girlfriend, Tina Taylor, 18, had been out one night at the local pub called the D Hotel. They both left the hotel at around 10:15 p.m. and walked down the side of the building. It was a clear and still night when Tina commented on faint luminous mist coming up from the ground, and as Brian was observing the mist, Tina yelled out as the wall of the hotel that she'd been leaning against suddenly vanished, and she found herself falling backwards into empty space. As Brian and Tina looked around, they found that the D Hotel had completely disappeared, along with every other building and structure in the vicinity, and they were now standing in tall grass and trees as far as they could see. There was a full moon, as Brian and Tina were now in total shock, trying to come to terms with what had just happened to them. They bravely ventured forward, where what was once a paved road was now just rocks and long grass. As they made their way westwards, they came upon some marshland where D Lane once stood, and other landmarks had now disappeared, such as the Marine Lake, and they both looked at each other in a dazed state, wondering what the hell had happened and how did they end up in the middle of nowhere, and came to the conclusion that they were now lost. Tina then spotted three figures in the distance on horseback coming towards them, but Brian had a bad feeling as they drew closer. Tina figured the men on horseback might be able to give them directions, but Brian quickly suggested they crouch and hide in the long grass, hoping they would not be spotted with the full moon. As the three men came closer, they noticed that the full moon was reflecting off of what appeared to be armour, and as they drew even closer, they looked like Roman soldiers, which scared the hell out of them. After seeing the soldiers close up, both Tina and Brian figured they'd somehow been transported back in time, and when the Roman soldiers disappeared into the distance, they felt safe to come out of hiding and walk back to the area they'd just come from. Then all of a sudden, the moon disappeared behind some clouds, and they were back amongst familiar buildings on Meals Drive in West Kirby. It was at this stage that Tina allowed herself to cry, as she feared she would never see her family again. When they tried to tell their terrifying experience to friends and family, they were met with laughter and derision. It appears that Tina and Brian had been caught in a time slip and had momentarily been transported back almost 2,000 years. After researching local history, they found that the Romans would have occupied the area around AD 50. Leeds Castle. Alice Pollock was a psychometrist and is also called an object reader, which is a process where facts or impressions about a person or thing are received through contact with an object associated with the subject of the impressions. One day, Alice was visiting Leeds Castle in Kent in southeast England and entered a room that was known as Henry VIII's room. She walked around touching various ancient objects in the hope of experiencing events from another period in time. Alice had easy access to most rooms as she was a relative of the family that resided at Leeds Castle, and the relative specifically chose a room that Alice Pollock's parents had once stayed in. Alice then proceeded to walk around the room, touching various objects where she initially received no impressions. Then all of a sudden, the room completely changed, and instead of its modern comfortable appearance, became cold and bare, without any carpets. Logs were now burning in the fireplace, which was now in another part of the room. And then in front of Alice stood a woman, wearing a white dress, and was deep in concentration, and appeared to be anguished whilst walking up and down. The room had been the prison of Queen Joan of Navarre, who was Henry V's stepmother, who had been accused of witchcraft by her husband. The charges were probably an attempt at claiming her wealth, as Joan had never been involved in any witchcraft. She had been imprisoned in Leeds Castle, where she maintained a luxurious lifestyle. When Henry V lay dying in 1422, he ordered that she be released and have her goods returned to her, where Joan resumed her life as a wealthy widow. Although Alice Pollock appears to have been momentarily transported back in time, it is also possible that she'd experienced a residual haunting, where apparitions are seen walking around a room doing the same motion over and over, and are unaware of the people around them. These apparitions do not have any interaction with witnesses. Another name for residual hauntings is the stone tape theory, where ghosts and hauntings are like tape recordings that leave mental impressions during an emotional or traumatic event. These in turn are recorded into walls or rocks and replayed under certain conditions. Alice had seen Queen Joan in a state of extreme stress and anxiety, thereby leaving behind an emotional recording.